In this lesson, we're going to talk about adjusting alignment, which does include spacing as well. We're going to discuss aligning the text horizontally on the page. We're going to talk also about vertically aligning the text on the page. We're going to change the line spacing if your instructor or teacher asks you to double space your document or single space your document. That's what they're talking about. And then we're going to be discussing adding or removing space above or below your paragraphs. In Lesson 4, we're going to need to open multiple files, so we're going to be coming back to our book a few times. This first time we're going to go to page 110. And again, we're in Lesson 4, which is dealing with adjusting alignment and spacing. So I'm going to come up here and go to page 110. And on that page you will see a doc file that can be opened. And once that file is opened, we need to enable editing. And we're going to save this file into a folder with today's date. So I'm going to go to File, Save As, go to My Documents. If you already have a folder with today's date in it, go ahead and double-click on that folder. If not, click on New Folder and type in today's date. Press Enter. Then double-click on that folder with today's date. The file name, W04 Try A, is correct, but we do need to add a dash and then our initials after it. We save that file, and now we're ready to begin working. With our file open, we're going to be taking a look now at these paragraph settings that are listed right here at the top in the paragraph group. The left align, the center, the right align, and justify. I'm going to start with this first paragraph. We're going to select the top paragraph. And currently this is right aligned, meaning that the right edge is aligned to the right edge of the page. And what we're going to do is we're going to change this to a left alignment. So I click on the left align button, and now the left sides are flush with the left edge or the left margin, and the right edge is not. You can also choose to center your text. I'm going to select this text right here, for example, pressing Ctrl-E, and I wish to center the text. It's currently left aligned, so I click this button here, and that centers the text horizontally left to right. Selecting this text, most text is left aligned. What I want to do is take this paragraph and we're going to flush that to the right side, moving it over to the right edge of the text, right edge of the margin. And then finally, this setting is rarely used, but can be from time to time, and that's the justify setting. Notice that the left edge is aligned, meaning that there's a nice smooth left margin when this is selected, but the right side is not smooth, it's jagged over here. What the justify setting does, which is this setting right here, what the justify setting does is it evens both sides out. It puts spaces within the line to allow both sides to be even. While this may be visually appealing, it is difficult sometimes to read this if you have a lot of justified text. Alright, let's save this file. And you may close this file as we're going to move to another exercise. The next file we're going to need to open is on page 111. So I just used the arrow to the right to move to the next page in the book. Here I can now open the doc file. I am going to enable editing. I'm going to save this file, Save As. I'm going to go to Documents and go to the folder that I created earlier. Double click on that folder. This file is W04try-B. I'm going to add my initials to that, -SM for me, and I click Save. With try-B open, you'll see that the text actually appears at the bottom of the document. Now for this activity, I want to turn the Show Hide on. That's on the Home tab. That's this paragraph symbol. And if you turn on your Show Hide, you will see some paragraph symbols down here. Notice there's no paragraph symbols coming down the page. That means somebody did not press enter a bunch of times in order to get the text to the bottom of the page. It's actually aligned to the bottom of the page. Normally text is aligned to the top of the page. Here's where we can make the setting to change the alignment of the text on the page. We're going to go to the Page Layout tab on the ribbon, and right here we've got what's called Page Setup. We're going to open up the Page Setup dialog box. The dialog box is opened by clicking on this little diagonal arrow here, and that opens up a dialog box with which I can have choices from. Here's where I can adjust margins and other items. We want to go to the Layout tab. On the Layout tab, what we're specifically going to look at is this vertical alignment right here. This is typically set to top, but as you can now see, it's set to bottom. Let's set this right now to top to see what this would normally look like. I click OK. My text is now at the top of the page, as I would normally expect to see my text when I'm typing into a Word document. This is how I might expect it to see it. At times, when you're doing things like signs or banners or something along those lines, you may want to center your text on the page. And this setting allows us to do that. Let's go back to Page Setup, the dialog box opener. On the Layout tab, let's change this to a center setting. When I click OK, what I will notice, and I'm going to zoom out a little bit here, what I will now notice is my text is centered in the middle of the page. This is very typical for things like signs or banners, things along those lines. That's the last item relating to try-B. So let's go ahead and save that file, and you can close it, getting ready for the next activity, which we'll need to go to the book. We have one more file that we're going to need to open up from the book. We're going to get some practice opening these files from the book. And that file is going to be on page 112. So with my book open, I'm going to go ahead and advance to the next page, page 112. Here I see the doc file once again. I'm going to click on that doc file and open my Word document. Once again, I need to enable the editing. And again, I'm going to save this to a folder with today's date. So I'm going to do a File, Save As. Notice that you can go directly to a recent folder, the one that has today's date on it. And I'm going to add the -SM for my initials to the file name. I click Save, and this file is now ready for our activities. With the Try-C file now open, we're going to talk a little bit about spacing within our paragraphs. Often you will hear a teacher or an instructor when you get to college will tell you that the paper needs to be turned in and it needs to be double spaced, or it needs to be spaced using 1.5 spacing. Well, here's how we make this happen. We're going to first of all just adjust the spacing for the first paragraph. So I'd like you to select the 2 lines in this first paragraph. And where we can adjust the spacing from the ribbon is on the Home tab, Paragraph Group. These are settings relating to my paragraph. This button right here is my line and paragraph spacing. If a teacher or an instructor tells me to double space my text, I am going to choose the 2.0, i.e. double space, setting, and that will allow for double spacing of my text on the page. The next thing we're going to deal with is the spacing after the text. And if you go to the same dialog box, you have the ability to add space before or to remove space after. There already is spacing after this particular text, and so this is giving me the option to remove that space. Now, this is very limiting. It doesn't give you any real options. You either can add space, it doesn't tell you how much, or you can remove space if some has already been added. If you want to add specific amounts, we need to go into the line spacing option. This opens up our dialog box, and now I can change my spacing either before or after my paragraph. Right now there's 8 points of space after my paragraph, and we want to change this to be 12 points of space. So let's go ahead and change this to 12 points. I click OK, and that's going to increase the space just a little bit here. Sometimes you may be asked to do some other types of spacing. Now for this, we're going to select actually the first 2 paragraphs. So I'm going to take my mouse, and using this selection bar to the left, I'm going to drag my mouse straight down, and that's going to select all of these lines for both of the first 2 paragraphs. And what we want to do is we're going to change the line spacing. So we're going to go to the same button we've been talking about, go to line spacing. Instead of setting, and by the way, notice that after right now has no value in it. That's because the first paragraph has one value, the second paragraph has a different value, so they are differing values. What we're going to do is set them to the same value, but the value is going to be set over here where it says line spacing. We're going to set that line spacing to a setting called exactly. I do want to point out to you that there are several settings that you could see on your certification exam. It could ask you to set the line spacing to exactly and give a value, or at least and give a value. If you're asked to set the line spacing to using either at least or exactly, you must come in here in order to make this happen. You can't do it from the ribbon. We're going to change this to exactly because the book would like us to change this to exactly 15 points. So I'm going to use my up arrow here to adjust the point value to be 15 points. I click OK, and that changes the line spacing. That's the amount of space from one line to the next. The second paragraph they wish to adjust, and this time they're going to adjust the spacing on this to the spacing above the paragraph and the spacing below the paragraph. So going back to my line spacing options, we're not going to mess with the line spacing exactly, so the sentences, the lines here are going to stay the same, but what I am going to do is adjust the space both before and after. The book wants us to adjust the setting of the before, which will be the amount of white space above the paragraph, to 24 points. And they want us to adjust the line spacing after, That's the white space that will appear underneath the paragraph. They want that to be 36 points. I click OK. I now have spacing above and I have spacing below. Selecting the last line, you can see that there is some spacing above and some spacing below this line. If I wish to just remove all the spacing, we can do that right from the ribbon using this bar that we have here. We can choose to remove the space after. Apparently, looking at this, there is no space before. The white space I was noting is probably the spacing of paragraph 2 rather than the spacing for paragraph 3. So there is no spacing before, but there is spacing after. So I'm going to click on this remove spacing after. And at this point, the spacing above and below both become 0. To confirm this, I can open up the dialog box and you can indeed confirm that there is 0 points before and 0 points after. This wraps up this particular lesson. We're going to save our work and close this file. In this lesson, we learned to adjust our text horizontally on the page. We learned about the Home tab and the Align Left, Align Center, Align Right, and even took a brief look at justified alignment. We also dealt with aligning text vertically on the page. That was the Try-B file that had the text at the bottom of the page. We adjusted it so that ultimately it was centered on the page. Then we looked in Try-C at line spacing. We looked at double spacing or single spacing. We adjust the spacing so that it was exactly a specific point value. We then also adjusted the spacing before or after a paragraph, putting extra white space or less white space, as the case would be, either above or below, or as it's specifically stated in the lesson and in the dialog box, before or after a paragraph.